So I wanted to do my best books that I enjoyed in 2023. Some of these are 4 stars, and only for the fact that maybe I had little issues with them, but they're books I still think about. You know, they're books like I still have thoughts about, you know, even like, you know, the end of the year. Like, say if I read it in January, I still think about the book, you know. And when it does that, that's when I'm like, okay, I have to choose it as like one of my best books I've read this year. Because other books I've read throughout the year, it's like, psh, I hardly remember them, you know. So the first one I'd have to say is Hero by Claire Kent. Now this here, I gave it 5 stars. You have Zed and Esther. And this whole series is basically all found family. You know, people finding each other, forming bonds with each other because you're under the, this, my neighbor next door is kind of loud. That's his kitchen over there. So you have these families that you form bonds with. So this whole series is basically a post-apocalyptic world. There was an asteroid that ended up hitting Earth, and it ended up creating, you know, like you have these roving gangs that kind of go around, they rob and they hurt people, things like that, kidnap people, that type of thing. So you have these people who kind of like have formed like these little bonds with other people they've come across, and they, you know, try to stay safe as much as they can. They have to scrounge, but they also, you know, if they hear something coming, they gotta hide, you know, that type of thing. So it's a lot of death and destruction has gone on, and you have people who've died from this mystery illness where it was something in the air, and so a lot of people ended up dying from it, end up getting sick and dying. So Zed and Esther, was it her sister? I believe so. Yeah. She has, no, it was her mom. That's what it was, her mom. So her mom and this other guy had gotten married. And so her stepfather, he had a younger brother. And his younger brother is Zed. And so she never, you know, like when they got married, you know, she never really like thought of him as an uncle. She's like, this guy's an annoyance. He teases me, bugs me, you know, because she was like 15 at the time and he was 22. So they're kind of like, you know, close in age, you know. And so he never really took life too seriously. He was always kind of a flake, you know. He kind of like, you know, bang women and kind of like, he was kind of like a pump and dumper kind of dude, you know, pump and dump, you know, or hump and dump, whatever it's called, hump and dump. I think it's hump and dump kind of dude. And so never really took life seriously. And then all of a sudden this asteroid hits, you know, and he has to like, you know, get more responsible. Where with Esther's always been very like hyper vigilant, you know, like very, you know, her anxiety, you know, is pretty much like debilitating. Kind of remind me a little bit of myself, because I'm very much the type of person where I'm always like thinking. My head is always going, you know. It's like a clown show up in here. It's constantly going. I'm constantly thinking of things, and sometimes I think about bad things, you know. I'll have bad things that just kind of like pop in my head, and it makes me very like hyper vigilant and always like, you know, making sure the doors are locked at night. And you know, I'm kind of like OCD about it, you know, where always I check like 2 or 3 times, make sure the doors are locked, make sure the windows are locked, making sure like the house is like shut down and everything. Those are my routines. I have routines, and I can't get out of my routine. Otherwise I just start to like spiral. So my head just can't shut up. So with her, she's pretty much the same way, where she's very hyper vigilant. She always tries to, when she goes out to go, you know, like search for food and stuff like that, she always tries to make sure she's safe. She brings something with her and stuff like that, you know. So there ends up being like a time shift in here where it kind of shifts to about 6 years. And so she had like her stepfather, her mother, and I think it was like a grandparents or something like that too. It was a bit crowded. And then it had the step uncle's girlfriend at the time, and she was pregnant. So 6 years kind of like pass, and they have where there's Zed now with his daughter Katrina, but she goes by Rena, and then Esther. And so they kind of have formed like this little bond with each other, like a family. And they have the routines that they do pretty much every day. But it gets to a point where she starts to look at Zed differently, you know, like she starts to notice like things about him and starts to become like attracted to him. And things kind of progress to a point where they know they cannot stay in that location anymore because it's getting harder to like, basically you only go out a certain distance, and if you cannot find any more canned goods, you gotta go somewhere else. You gotta travel somewhere else to find food, because if you can't find food, you're going to starve. So they don't want Rena to starve or have anything where, she becomes sick or something. So they have to make a plan where they're like, we're going to go out to go see if we can find, other stuff. And so what happens is Esther runs into some of these people where they're traveling around. Some of them we know from other books. So at first she's like, obviously she's leery. She wasn't sure she could trust them. And then Zed has come down because he noticed that Esther hasn't come back yet. And so he ends up finding Esther, and they, it takes some time, but they obviously, calm down enough to where they could talk to each other. And they're like, okay, we need to obviously go to this Eden, because they talked about this place called Eden. And they're like, we need to go there because, basically, essentially, it's a strength in numbers kind of thing, And so they decide they need to go there themselves because they're not going to do well anymore by themselves. It's just things are kind of seem like they're getting worse, and finding, scrounging for food, stuff like that. So they all kind of all separate, the group that they found, kind of like goes somewhere else, and they decide we're going to go to Eden. So on their way there, they run into some stuff. So I really liked the story. I loved how Esther was very strong. She was a strong-willed person. She was very stubborn. I'd say that too. But she definitely was a strong female character, because there was a scene in here where she had to, she was trying to, basically sacrifice herself to save Zed and Rena. And I really liked that, because I was like, it was a really emotional scene, and it just showed how strong of a person Esther was, where she was willing to sacrifice the person that she fell for, fell in love with. And sacrifice her life so she could protect the child that she ended up forming this bond with, that she thought of her as her daughter. That was so sweet. I love that scene, and it really kind of like 5-star, like that scene hit, and I was just like, this is a 5-star. And I really enjoyed it. I love the found family aspect. I'm a sucker for found family. If you tell me this is a found family story, I'm going to go and just eat that up, because I love found family. I feel like for me, I have, I found my own family, with my husband's family. Right now we're kind of going through something, and I don't want to get too deep into it, but we're going through something right now. And so to me, it's like, I like those stories where we talk about found family and finding people you connect with, mentally, physically, that type of thing. Where, just because somebody is your blood doesn't mean that they are your family. You just share like, DNA, partial DNA with them, it doesn't mean anything, especially when your blood family doesn't treat you very well, you know. That's when you want to form bonds with other people and you have this found family. So I really appreciated the book, and I just, yeah, Esther's probably definitely like a favorite heroine of mine when it comes to this series. She's definitely one of my favorites. There's other women I liked too in the stories, but she definitely, I'd say Esther's probably like my number one, because she kind of remind me a little bit of myself when it comes to like anxiety and her dealing with her anxiety and trying to calm herself down and things like that, you know, and try not to overthink, you know. But I really enjoyed this one. So the next one I liked is Stacy Reed is A Matter of Temptation. So we have the characters of Wilhelmina, her name is Mina Crawford, and Simon Lofton, the Earl of Creswick. So I said I was very impressed with the story. I said it's definitely a favorite read of mine. So I said I love the fact that Mina went to help her brother and was disguised as him to fight in a sword duel. And I said she wins, and before she can walk away, the Earl discovers that she is a woman. Now, the Earl had basically challenged, or no, her brother challenged the Earl to a duel because the Earl basically accused her brother of cheating, which he technically was. So they're kind of like, they're destitute. They're really trying to get by, and her brother unfortunately is kind of a ding-dong, and he does stupid things, and so she kind of has to bail him out all the time. So she decides, because her brother's not very good at fencing, you know, their father had taught them how to do it, but she's better at it, you know, she took a liking to it, so she adapted better to it. So she decides, I'm going to fight in the duel, I'm going to dress as a man, and he's going to think that, you know, I'm you. And so she ends up winning the duel. And the way she like either walked or presented herself, the Earl was like, that's not a man. That is not the person I know. That's a female. He could tell like she's a female. So he ends up like cornering her and getting her like into his like study or library, and basically tells her, I know you're a woman, you know. And so he's like, you know, if you want me to keep quiet, you're going to do something for me. You're going to work as my secretary. So they start this, you know, employer-employee relationship. And it soon turns into like, you know, them forming this bond with each other. And so he didn't feel, you know, I said, instead of getting mad or feeling offended that a female beat him, he decides to hire her as a secretary. Of course, this is basically unheard of back in that time, because men were usually secretaries when it came to those types of jobs. Women were not secretaries. Now, pretty much like, I think it's more or less more of a female-dominated job, being a secretary. So he pretty much was like, I don't care, you know, if you're a female, I'm going to hire you, you know. And so I said, I love the Earl. He was so mysterious because he came off as very unemotional. Like you didn't really see any emotion from him. He was very much straight-laced, very professional, you know. I said, he clearly is a genius and he doesn't really care what other people think of him. He has had women in the past in the bedroom, but none of them ever stirred any desires out of him. So as soon as he sees Mina in the light, he is instantly intrigued with her. I also love the fact that he valued her opinion. He also wasn't some stuffed shirt. He valued the everyday workers and wanted them to have the right to vote. So he was working towards that in this book. I said, creating bills that makes things better for everyone. So I said, Mina is keeping a secret, which ends up getting exposed in the book. But I said, and the Earl is shocked by it at first, but also love the fact that I love the fact that he didn't judge her. And she really was, you know, she opened him up, you know, and she explained what happened. I thought they worked well together. But I really liked how, I guess you'd say his character would probably be considered in today's time, like progressive, you know. He very much wanted the workers to have the right to vote, you know, when it came to things like, especially like during that time, you know, women didn't have that right to vote, but also there were people who worked in labor jobs that also did not have rights to vote either. So he essentially was trying to open up more of the voting, so where it's not just like the elites that have that right, everyone will have the right, you know. So I appreciated that. I liked that he wanted to make it to where it was more of even type of thing. No one had more power than the other, you know, have it more level. That's what I like to see. I don't like to see where one group or one political party or whatever it is has more power than the other, you know, type of thing. It makes it very uneven and makes it to where somebody suffers. There's always somebody that suffers. So I like to see more of a middle ground when it comes to things, you know, having it to where everybody is able to flourish, you know. So, of course, you know, there's going to be people who are still on the higher ranks of things because they know how to make money, or they know, you know, how to invest or whatever it is. So they're going to have obviously more money than some other people. But I don't want to see people who are extremely poor, you know, and maybe it's because of their, you know, maybe they're not educated or they had a string of bad luck. I don't want to see anybody starve or suffer. You know, you want to see everybody thrive, you know? So he just seemed like he was trying to do his best to make it to where you have laws in place to where it's helping out people who are less fortunate, people who are, you know, that need kind of like a hand up, you know, hand up, a leg up kind of thing, you know, that type of thing. So I appreciated that. So the next one I ended up reading and I really enjoyed is Jillian Bondarchuk. This is The Oath, the Grey Tower Chronicles. Now you have the characters of Malcolm and Koira. Excuse me, my allergies are bugging me. So Malcolm is a Scottish laird, and he makes a blood oath with a witch so Malcolm can save his brother's life. In order to fulfill that blood oath, he has to find and marry the witch's only daughter, Koira. So he waits at the last minute and almost dies, and Koira finds him, which I have to fix that. I didn't spell fine right. Sometimes I realize my mistakes until after I read it. Finds him in the woods and saves him. I said, I enjoyed this continuation onto the story about a marriage of strangers who get to know each other and fall in love. I said, I liked Koira. She was leery and scared to be around other people who weren't a part of her druid family because she's a part of the original druids. And so I said she was 13 years old when she was burned at the stake and her family had saved her before her body got consumed by the flames. I said, unfortunately, it left her badly scarred, so she has insecurities about her face and her body. I said, I also enjoyed that her magic was a healing energy. She could allow darkness to overtake her if she wanted to, but she loved healing people and helping to preserve life rather than to destroy it. So Malcolm was great because he was so patient with her and took his time for them to form a bond with each other. So with this one here, it's like, it definitely is more of a slow burn. It's historical, but also is a fantasy. I will say, I am not a fan of fantasy romances. I don't know why. I'm really not. But this one here, I really enjoyed these books. This one and the first book. First one definitely reminded me a bit of like Outlander. Because you have like that time travel where she's traveled back in time. And then, you know, the heroine falls in love with the hero, which kind of remind me a bit of like, what you'd say, Jamie Fraser, you know? And in this one here, you have the older brother, Malcolm, who he made this blood oath to save his brother because his brother got injured in the first book. And so he ends up saying, I will marry, you know, this witch's daughter. And so he kind of like resigns himself to his fate, saying like, this is probably not going to be a love match. I'm going to have to deal with this woman, but I wanted to save his brother. He wanted to save his brother. You know, he would do anything to save his brother. So he basically waits till the last minute and he almost dies in the woods. And luckily Koira finds him and she brings him back to her mother's cabin in the woods because she was staying there for a little bit because because she was working on something else. Like, she's basically a healer, almost like a doctor, where she goes to different places and she heals like broken bones, different things like that, injuries, things like that. She knows of ways of healing, you know, people, sickness, things like that. So he's really in bad shape when she finds him, and she ends up like using her healing powers to bring him back. He was pretty much dead at that point, and she used her magic to bring him back to life. And so from there, he basically tells her like what her mother had done to like for this blood oath. And so she kind of like resigns herself to her fate as well, knowing that, okay, my mother had, you know, I don't know why my mom did this, but, you know, my mother had basically done this. I need to go with him to his, you know, because he's a Scottish laird. He has his land, you know, to his land, and basically try to make it work. And so you see this, they form this bond with each other. They start to, you know, form a friendship with each other. First, it's like, you know, them trusting each other in, you know, in his home, and then it goes from there to a friendship. And then that friendship, of course, develops into something romantic. And I very much liked Koira. She dealt with a lot of stuff when she was little. You know, as I said, when she was 13, there was this religious man, priest, you know, man who saw that she was a witch and basically wanted to burn her at the stake, which most, I would say most, when it came to witches dying, they didn't really burn at the stake. It was more hangings. But this one here, he wanted to burn her. So she started to burn, and her mother ended up saving her. Unfortunately, her father was killed, you know, when they were trying to save the daughter. And her mother wasn't able to heal her properly, so she ended up growing up with scars on her face and her body and stuff. So she very much was like, he's not going to want me because I'm damaged and things like that. And he actually, you know, Malcolm saw past her scars. You know, he's like, well, the scars are a part of her, and I'm not going to, you know, treat her badly because of what happened to her. So he very much was a very caring man, you know, and he saw past, like, you know, her scars and saw the beauty within. And it was very sweet because I liked Koira because she was a healer. You know, she could have went to like more of a black magic, but she didn't want to do that. She wanted to stay with like her white magic and heal things around her. You know, she couldn't heal herself, but she could heal things around her. I thought it was a very, very beautiful story. And it is more of a drawn out story. Like, if you want like instant gratification, you're not going to find that with this. This is very much more of a slow burn. So yeah, I would say, like, if you're a fan of history, you know, historical romance, and you also like a bit of a fantasy in there, like, you know, fantasy, because, you know, she obviously had like witch powers, she had magical powers, things like that. So, but I really enjoyed this one. I liked the first book as well. And I'm waiting for the third to come out. I really want the third book to come out. It was supposed to come out in like June or July of this year, but the author had like pushed it back. I don't know why, but I really want, like, I want that book to come out. I want the third one to come out, because the third one has to do with, she had a sister. Koira had a sister, and the sister ended up going missing, and she couldn't find her. So the third one has to do with the sister and another guy. So I definitely am looking forward to that book when it comes out. And I'm like, please, Julian, please, please. I want to read that, because these two I really enjoyed, you know. But the next book I did enjoy was Beverly Jenkins's Indigo. Now this one here all deals with the Underground Railroad and during the time of American history when we had slavery and things like that. So it's a very emotional story. So you have Hester, who is a I guess you'd say she's an escaped slave. She had help with, I can't remember who it was that helped her. I think it was a family member of hers or something like that had helped her escape from the Indigo plantation. And she is basically called Indigo by Galen, this character she ends up meeting up with, because she works for essentially the Underground Railroad. So the reason why she's called Indigo is because her hands, when she worked on the plantation when she was a little girl, her hands ended up getting stained indigo. So she has like the, purple on her hands that are forever stained. And of course, people look down on her because she was a former slave. So there definitely is a bit of prejudice within the own, within the Black community that had it to where they looked down on the ones who were former slaves. There were ones who were born into, they were born free. And so some of them looked down on the ones who were former slaves, which that's not their fault. So there very much was that kind of prejudice in here. And also you have prejudice with obviously white people who didn't treat, slaves, didn't treat people, Black people, right. And some owning slaves. And then you had, you had some that you were trying to help too. So she very much was very, very secretive, but she also was very leery about the people that she formed relationships with, because you never know, like, if somebody was working against you to help with, like, help with some of the slaves and stuff like that, getting some of them to freedom. And so she was living in this house by herself. I think it was her aunt. I think it was her aunt, if I'm remembering correctly. I think it was her aunt that ended up helping her, because her father died when she was really little. Her father was a freed slave, and he ended up selling himself into slavery so he could be with the woman he loved. And then they had Hester. So Hester very much, has this, I guess you'd say, guilt. She has a sense of guilt because her father had given up everything to be with her mother. And so she, pretty much was like, feeling that guilt of like, if it wasn't for that, So it's a very emotional story. And then you have what they call, I think it was the Black Daniel. I think that's what they called him, where Galen is basically undercover, calls himself the Black Daniel, so he can help free slaves. He ends up getting injured, and so Hester ends up getting stuck with helping him, essentially. This man drops him off and says, he's injured, this is the Black Daniel, can you help him? And so she ends up like bringing him back to health, but he is a very stubborn patient. And so she doesn't have a good relationship with him at first. It's kind of like more of a hate to love thing. And so he ends up, basically, having her think differently about him. And so it's very much like their story. And you end up finding out more about him because he actually is a man with a title. And so you look at the fact that there's people who don't want her to get involved with him, knowing that he has a title, he has money of his own. So you very much have that kind of, it's very, very much like, English ladies, where it's like, if a woman doesn't have any money or anything to bring to the table, then they don't want to marry, they don't want to marry her. So it's pretty much almost like that here, where it's like, if she doesn't have any money, then you don't want her marrying somebody with a title type of thing, But yeah, it was a very emotional story, and I really enjoyed it a lot. I really liked his accent, because he had more of a, he was obviously from down in the South, and they had more like Creole and stuff like that, French and Creole kind of thing. So he had a bit of a French accent, and I loved when he called her like Indigo, or like called her petite, you know, type of thing. Oh, it's just, man, it's like melted butter. I was just like, oh dang, you know. He very much was like, she was pretty much like trying to keep pushing him away, and he wasn't having it. So, but it was a sweet story, you know, even though underneath that backdrop of like just such sadness, and darkness during that time, there was that, you know, essentially that, you know, like they have, say, like the prettiest flowers like grow under like the you know, like unnatural, you know, circumstances, stuff like that, like maybe pretty flowers grow in darkness type of thing, you know. But yeah, I thought it was a really nice story, really good story. And I do need to get back to more of, you know, Beverly Jenkins books. I do have some of them that I had bought that I do need to get back to. I read, there was a couple other stories I read during this year that was Beverly Jenkins, but I'd say Indigo stood out to me the most. You know, I really enjoyed that one. But I will say, like, if you are going to delve into Indigo, it is good to read that one first before you delve into some of the other ones, because there was a couple other ones, like I think it's Vivid. It might be Vivid, where it takes place years after Indigo, where Hester and Galen are married, you know, and they, you know, have been married for a while and stuff. So I'd say you definitely want to read Indigo before you read Vivid. You know, even though I think Vivid came out before Indigo, but I would go and start with Indigo first, then Vivid, and go from there. But yeah, sad, you know, sad, but also it was a beautiful story. I just, you know, I loved her, I loved Hester's perseverance. So, the next book was Boom Slang. This is by Naomi Lucas. This is the Naga Brides, book 5. And I'd say this is probably my favorite book out of the series. Now, this series here, I have pretty much given, there's only 2 I gave 4 stars. This was one of them. The rest were like 3s. But the thing that really kind of keeps me going with this series is the fact that the world building is really interesting. I love the world building. You have basically humans come back to Earth because Earth had basically gotten destroyed from these aliens. These aliens came down and they're like, oh, we can help you with your technology and all that stuff. Meanwhile, they wanted to take over the planet. So humans had to fight back, and they survived, but there was a lot of deaths. So they ended up going out into outer space, and they hadn't been back to Earth for like many years. So there were these Naga snakes that were created. So they're like half human, half snake kind of thing. And so they're all looking for mates. And so these human women come down, and the Naga snakes pretty much form bonds with them. And so you have this one here, which was book 5. So you have this woman, she's an older woman. So her name is Lauren, and you've got Azote. I think it's Azote, Azsote. I'm going to say Azote. So I said there will be, I will talk about like a content warning in here too, to let you know. I said, so if you've been following the series, you know that Laura was introduced in the previous novel, book 4. As Laura escapes the ship she's on because she has a recorder that she wants to give to someone else in charge, because the man who has been commanding these missions to Earth is a horrible piece of donkey shit. This guy's a piece of crap. He doesn't care about the other women on the ship. He doesn't care about like any of the species that are on Earth. He wants to basically use it to his own advantage. So I said, you end up finding out in the story that Laura's reproductive eggs were essentially stolen from her, and she has reached the age where she is going to be going through menopause. I said years ago she was sexually assaulted by the guy running the missions to Earth, and he harvested her eggs to implant his seed. Yeah. She's a part of this medical family that first started on Earth, and she has a daughter, Vivian, that she doesn't know through the piece of crap who sexually assaulted her. So essentially, it's a form of reproductive coercion. Also, her family was okay with this, which is like fucked up. I said I enjoyed this story more than the others because Asot was not extremely possessive or controlling as the other Naga snakes. And that was the thing that kind of like was more of a downer for these stories. And I ended up giving like 3 of these like 3 stars because the Naga snakes were so possessive and controlling and jealous and stuff like that. You know, was like in their DNA. So he was not as much that way. He was very young. He was a very young. So this is like an age gap because she's like in her like late 40s to 50s around there. And he's like, you know, very young, you know. I'd say if you wanted to put him age on him, he's probably like in his 20s, even though Naga snakes are older than what you would think, you know. Like he's obviously older than, you know, human years. But, you know, they age slowly. You know, they age more slowly. I said he was willing to give Laura up if she truly wanted to go back to the ship. So also I felt like she controlled their sexual encounters better. Where with the other ladies, I kind of felt like the Naga snakes were more controlling in the bedroom, and not always a fan of that. I said I also like the fact that not all of these women will be reproducing with the Naga men, because Laura was an older female. I said Asot also was okay with the fact that he wasn't going to be a father. I said the only downside of this story was the fact that I felt like the story dragged on a bit. But other than that, I really enjoyed this one a lot for the fact that she very much was more of the dominant in the relationship, where with the other Naga, you know, snakes, it's not always that. You know, the men were more the controlling and stuff like that. I'm not always a fan of that. Sometimes I like to see like the female have a little bit more, you know, control in the bedroom, or like have them more on equal footing kind of thing. You know, I like more of an equal footing. I don't really like it where the man is more the dominant and a woman's the submissive. I don't always like that. It depends on how it's done when it comes to like on page, you know. Someone in their damn music. But I really enjoyed this one a lot. I'd say the first one I liked. I did give it 4. The other ones were 3s. But like I said, it's the story building. You know, it's this, you know, the way the world building is. I just really enjoy it. I enjoy the stories. I probably enjoy the stories more than I enjoy the relationships, you know. But this one here I thought was well done. And the fact that, you know, there is a form of like forcing women to give birth. It was like a different way of doing it, where it's still considered what I said, reproductive coercion, where you're like forcing the woman to have a baby, even though she didn't give birth to the baby. It still was a part of her, like her DNA, her eggs, that was forced from her body by this fucker. So, yeah, that was interesting. And I would say, like, if you're, you know, more upset about stuff like that, you probably wouldn't want to read this one. But this one was really interesting. I liked the way the author, Naomi Lucas, had did that, you know. It was really interesting. So I'm thinking like somebody wants to come in here. Because I'm in my daughter's room, so I told them, like, you know, stay in the living room. So the next one is Ruby Dixon, When She's Wary. I really like this one because the character was pretty much like an introvert, a shut-in, and I loved her. She was so funny. She was so feisty. So we have Tabitha and Jeru. So I said, absolutely love this one. And also Tabitha reminded me so much of myself. I said, if I was on an alien planet, I would act just like her. She was hilarious, and her insults. I said, I also loved how Jeru was so patient with her and knew that there must have been a reason why she was so guarded and closed off. I said, I also love that he kept saying that he loved how she smelled. You know, he's like, I love her smell. I said, I love that they started out as friends, and it was Tabitha that pushed for them to become intimate, and that he asked her if what he was doing was okay. It was such a sweet novella. I gave that 5 stars. And I really enjoyed that one because she had dealt with, you know, these are the women who were part of the Rizda verse. You know, they're on the Rizda 3 planet. And so these are all women who they've dealt with like being slaves and being like assaulted and things like that. So these women are all scarred. They've all been through trauma. And so he very much was like, I'm going to get to know this neighbor, you know, because his brother in the previous book had got together with this one woman. And so he's like, well, I'm going to go and befriend that neighbor. So what happens is that there's this stuff that I think it's called Noli. It's essentially like catnip. And so he's like I believe he was a Praxian, right? I think he's a Praxian. And Praxians are essentially like hybrid cats. And so he ends up being in the vicinity of this Noli. And the Noli, his basically sister-in-law, likes to use with her and his brother. So that way they can kind of like get on and all that stuff. And it really turns them on. And so he ends up being in the vicinity of it, and he tries to get away from it, and he ends up going over to the neighbor's house to try to get away from it, and he ends up like being in a lot of pain because it's very painful for them unless they, you know, fulfill their, you know, unless they go and fulfill it, you know. So she's kind of like, why are you here? You know, why are you on my porch? You know, get out of here, kind of thing. And so he ends up like, you know, talking with her through the door and all that stuff. And she ends up like helping him, you know, reluctantly, because she wants him off her porch. But she was so funny. She was so funny. I laughed hysterically at the things, like the insults she would do. And he'd be like, kind of like, he would kind of use it as like, hey, this is like foreplay for me, you know? So I was like, I really enjoyed that one. It was really funny. And, you know, Ruby Dixon can make some of these novellas she does are really good, and then sometimes she can create a book that's just not it. So for Ruby Dixon, you know, though I love a lot of her books, some of them are misses for me. This one here was really enjoyable. I really liked it. So the next one I ended up reading, this one actually is a young adult, and I actually enjoyed this one. So there's no on-screen sexual situations. It's mainly just kissing. So if you don't mind, you know, young adult. So it's a high school vampire romance. It's called Too Sweet. It's by Monroe A. Wildrose. So we have the characters of Briar and Darcy. So it says young adult vampire romance, no intimate scenes, kissing, and there's making out and stuff like that. I said, I don't get into young adult romance much, but I was intrigued with the synopsis. I said, this was a little slow going, but once it started picking up, I got really into it. I said, Briar is definitely a grump, and she coughs up an attitude a lot with her teachers and other students. Then Darcy comes along for fake dating and, you know, to basically get back at her ex, jealous. And so he is her sunshine that she basically needed in her life. You know, he's the sunshine character. She's the grump, you know. I said, Darcy was so sweet and good to Briar. I said, I really liked seeing their relationship build the more time they're around each other. I said, I also liked that there was a representation of type 1 diabetes with Breyer in here, and the way that insurance really makes you jump through hoops just to get life-saving insulin. As I really like learning more about the disease, I said this was a cute love story. Now, my husband, he has diabetes, and he right now he takes Ozempic, which a lot of these fucking celebrities, you know, and everything use. And he only has to take it like once a week, and it's supposed to help with like weight loss and things like that. And it's supposed to help control your diabetes and stuff like that. So he has to go and give himself a shot every week and stuff like that. He used to have to do it like a lot more, but the medication he's on, he does it less. But insulin and things like that can be hard to get sometimes, like, because these fucking celebrities were all using the Ozempic, that was harder to come by. And so I'm like, look, if you don't need to take diabetes medication, fucking don't take it. It's not for you. It's only for the people who have diabetes. Fucking celebrities, go work out. You can hire a motherfucking goddamn gym instructor or whatever it is. You can go hire yourself your own fucking nutritional people and all that stuff. You can pay the money to go and hire somebody to work out your fat ass, you know? So stop fucking taking stuff that's for diabetes medication so you can lose some fucking weight. Fuck you. So it really irritates me and angers me when I see people who basically are taking medication from people who actually need it. You know, it just really angers me. So she dealt with diabetes, and her family, you know, pretty much were having a hard time with like managing the payments and stuff like that. Because, you know, with insurance, some of it pays for it. Some insurance don't want to pay for it. Like I remember an insurance that I was on with my ex, and the insurance didn't want to pay for inhalers, so I'd have to pay out of pocket for an inhaler. And I'm like, seriously? It's like $50. You don't want to pay for a fucking inhaler? So I'd have to pay out of pocket for it. And there were times that it was hard for me to, you know, scrounge up $50, you know, because I wasn't working a lot at the time. And then I got to the point where I wasn't working at all, so I'm like, now I have to ask, you know, my ex for like, can you buy me an inhaler, you know? So there were times I went without one. And so there were days that I didn't have one when I needed one. Now, I don't have like allergy attacks, but I have days where like my chest feels tight on me and stuff. And it just makes it to where it's a hard day. You know, it's a hard day. It's a hard breathing day. So what I've discovered is that eucalyptus, if I go and I heat up eucalyptus and kind of put my head down to like the water and breathe it in, it does help with clearing out your congestion. So I would say, like, if you're the type of person where you have an inhaler, but you don't like desperately need it, it's not one of those things where it's like you're going to have a asthma attack without it. If you have I have more of a bronchitis type of asthma. So if you're that type of person where you can't always afford it, there are cheaper versions that are out now. There's one that's a over-the-counter one you could find at CVS, Primatene Mist. They have that out. They had got rid of it for a while, but now they have it to where I don't have to get a prescription. I could just use the Primatene Mist, and that kind of like helps to clear out, you know, my congestion. But also using eucalyptus, the essential oil, that kind of helps with congestion. Also helps with colds too. Like if you keep coughing, it can help clear out your cold a little bit too. So I really enjoyed this one here because I got to know a little bit more of like type 1 diabetes. My husband is type 2. It's mainly him, just he needs to lose some fucking weight, you know. So it was good. It was a sweet thing because you see like the male character Darcy, he he liked her, you know, he could see he liked her. It was a cute romance. Like, if you're not looking for anything with like sex scenes and things like that, you want more of a sweet romance, like maybe more of a paranormal type of thing, this one here would, you know, work for you. It was sweet. I really liked it. So the next one I really liked, I thought it was interesting, was The Android Who Seduced Me by L. Taylor. Oh, I didn't put it down. I didn't write, I don't think I wrote a synopsis for this or wrote a review for this. I just, you know, gave it like 4 or 5 stars. So this one here, you have the woman where she is on the run, and somebody she knows through college is basically like, hey, I can give you one of my androids to help protect you. And she's like, but it's a sex android. And he goes, yeah, he goes, but I can, you know, I can make it work towards, you know, it helps protect you. So her boss, I think it was like her boss or her former boss, I can't remember, but she ends up witnessing something, and so she has to go in hiding. And so she wants someone as like a bodyguard to her. So she essentially gets this android, and the android ends up turning her on to the point where they start getting sexually involved with each other. He's very possessive, very jealous. There's more things that kind of like come out about him as an android and stuff like that. But it was a really interesting story of, like, you know, you could see the possessiveness of him, and, you know, things like that. And it was an interesting story. I really enjoyed it. I was not expecting that, you know. I was like, oh man, this is probably gonna be stupid. It was really good. I really did enjoy it. So let me see, how many more do I have? Because this is a long video. Okay, I have like a few more. So I'm going to try to get through these ones. Try to get through them a little quicker. So the next one was The Wolf and the Wildflower by Stacy Reed. I really enjoyed this one. It was really different. I gave it 5 stars. You basically have James, and James is... I can't remember if he's a duke or something. He's a titled man, and he ended up going missing years ago, and no one was able to find him. Well, finally, someone was able to find him, but he essentially, his family was a pack of wolves. So he has basically where more of a wolfish traits. He ended up like kind of developing these survival instincts and stuff like that, you know, out in the wild. And so his mother, you know, which I'm not a big fan of, I can understand his mother wanting him to fit into society, you know, but she also was like, wanted him to like switch back automatically. And it's like, for someone who's been out in the wild for how many years, he's not going to like switch back to like him being like how he was before. You know, he's changed. He's a different person now, you know? So I felt like she was very like unsympathetic, you know, and it just kind of irritated me. So she ends up hiring this doctor. He's basically like a psychologist, and his daughter, and his daughter is pretending to be a man. He knows his daughter as his son. He thinks his, you know, daughter is a boy, because that's something that his wife led him to believe when the baby was born. The woman, I felt a bit bad for her in that sense, where there were men obviously back in the day who they only really cared about boy, you know, babies, because the boys can, you know, lead on with the title. The title can go on with men. It wouldn't go on with women. So she had a lot of terrible pregnancies, to the point of like, I think she ended up having miscarriages, and she also lost the baby. Like the baby died, like, you know, early on. And so this was like, this was her last pregnancy. She didn't want to go and try to get pregnant anymore. She felt like she was going to die if she tried to have another baby. So when the baby came out as a boy, or as a girl, the wet nurse kind of like almost hinted to her, like, you know, I guess mistook it. And so the wife ended up telling her husband, oh, it's a boy. And so when basically the wet nurse had come to her and said, no, it's a girl. She's like, well, I can't tell my husband. I don't want to have another baby. And so the wet nurse was like, we won't say anything, because it's like, when was a man going to change a diaper during that time? Men don't do that back in the day. It was pretty much like the mother or the nurses or the nannies or whatever it is that were taking care of that type of thing. So there's no way he's going to know. So Jules was raised as a boy, but, obviously when she got to a certain age and, her period comes in and things like that, things have to be explained. So obviously her mother had to explain to her that, you actually are a girl, you're a female, but we have to pretend for you to be a boy because, her father will get mad. So she, plays up as, a boy, she's in a, men's outfit, things like that. But shortly after James, gets to know Jules, he realizes there's something different about this gentleman. He doesn't know what it is, but he's attracted to this gentleman. And then he ends up finding out that he is a she. And so it was basically there. I liked the relationship. I liked their building up, their connection with each other. You could tell like right away, James was like, attracted to Jules. And it almost like kind of reminded me a bit of like how wolves are attracted. It's like in their pheromones and things like that, you kind of could smell it from this person, which, in a sense, we still do have that, it's within our, DNA, we end up being attracted to people, not just like sexually, like by their looks, but also by their pheromones. People give off, you give off a scent, so this was an interesting story. I really liked how Stacy Reed had went with it, and I loved his character because he very much was more introverted. He liked to be outside in nature, and he'd go outside and he'd be naked basically, and that's for me. I'm like, not that I want to go outside and be naked because nobody wants to see this. But I just like that whole thing of like going out into nature, and he had someone like build him basically like a tree house, and I'm like, oh my God, that to me is like heaven. Be out in nature and just hear the sounds and be like by yourself. I like being by myself. It's not like I do hate people, but there are some people that, I have formed bonds with. I love my children, I love my husband, but I like to be by myself a lot because it, brings me back to myself. I like to, have time for myself. Some people get lonely. No, not me. I like being alone. It doesn't make me lonely. I like to have my, have my own things. But I really liked this one here. I had a lot of highlights for this, but I didn't want to go over all the highlights. But I really enjoyed this one a lot. So the next one, oh, I love this one. This was basically a 6-star for me. I freaking love this one. So we have Soft Flannel Hank by Eliza MacArthur. People had said like this is basically, what's his name again? Oh, the father from Twilight. I can't remember his name. I never really delved into Twilight all that much. I watched the movies and that was pretty much it. What the hell's his name again? Something Swan? I don't know. Whatever. I can't remember his name. But his name is Hank in here. His last name I think is Dove. Hank Dove. So Swan, Dove, It's essentially like almost like fan fiction, in a way. So I had said, oh my God, I love this book so much. I said, definitely 6-star read. So we have Esther and Hank. Esther is on the run and stops off into the town of World's End. She has the powers of a witch and she uses tarot cards. She meets Hank at a diner and they have an instant connection. They have a one-night stand and Hank instantly becomes smitten with her. I mean, he hasn't had like a woman in a long time and he finally has like this connection with this woman, I said, what can I say to fully appreciate how much I love this man? I said, Hank has been living alone for years. He was married at a very young age and has a daughter that is fully grown and off on her own. He's 45 years old and hasn't been intimate or been in a relationship for 17 years. I said, this man is so emotional and vulnerable and has such a big, beautiful heart. I said many times during this book, I wanted to be a part of the story and hug and protect him. He was like, protect Hank at all costs. This man was so like, you know, he was so emotional. And I just, oh man, I love this man. I said, things in the story I loved. I said, their connection was beautiful. I said, Esther saw so much heart and vulnerability within him. I said, too, the supernatural elements were so natural in here. I said, sometimes when I read paranormal romances, you know you are, and sometimes, you know you are reading a paranormal romance, and it kind of can bog down the story. I said, the paranormal elements in here felt so natural and real, just like it was like everyday normal. I said, number 3, Hank has been in therapy for a while because he used to be a police officer, and he dealt with some bad elements in that, and he also was still heartbroken from his wife leaving him. I said, I loved so much how he was working through his emotions and trying to improve how he communicated with the people around him. This man was in therapy. I mean, honestly, it was just like really good when I like to see, I'm trying to get this thing to go on. Ugh, hang on. So, come on. I hate this fucking thing. I hate you. I hate this stupid thing. So, I'm trying to get more light in here. So, he was going through therapy, and I really appreciated that a lot. A lot of times it's like usually a male main character will be like emotionally constipated, you know, where it's like, oh my God, just fucking say something, man. You know, like there are times like I get so frustrated with a heroine as well, you know, because it's like, look, us women are in tune to our fucking feelings. You'd think that we would, you know, communicate, you know, and everything. Ugh. So with this here, it's like he was going through how many years of therapy and trying to open himself up more. So when he meets Esther, it's like this instant connection with him, like he hasn't felt in like years, you know? And so when she's about to leave, he's like, no, I don't want her to go. Like, he's like, I want to be with her, you know, I want to like, you know, start a relationship, you know? And so he, basically does whatever he can to help her, you know? And, it's interesting. She had vampires in here. You had other like mystical beings in here. I can't wait for like the next book in the series because it has like other characters that were, you know, just really interesting in this book. And so it's like, it very much was like a cozy paranormal, you know, like it just felt very natural to me for like her having powers and different things like that. I really enjoyed this one a lot. And like I said, it was definitely like a 6-star to me. This one just was a very beautiful book, and it's just really hard for me to like express, like, this is probably like my favorite book of the year is probably this one here. Definitely a favorite of the year, you know, besides of course the other ones, but this one here is probably like my number 1. It was just, it was so good. So the next one I ended up reading and really enjoying, and I'm probably going to be talking about this in my December reads as well, is Butcher and Blackbird by Bryn Weaver. Now this is a dark comedy, serial killers romance. Very interesting. It reminded me a little bit of Dexter. Like if Dexter had a girlfriend, you know, that actually killed people too, you know, that's what it kind of reminds me of. So we got Rowan and Sloane. So I said there's blood in here, dismemberment, cannibalism. It's some gory shit. So I'd say like if you like horror, if you like romance, you like comedy, this probably would be up your alley. So this was a really interesting read. I said, if you are a fan of horror, dark comedy, and romance, this is definitely up your alley. Like I said, Sloane is trapped in a cage after she killed a serial killer, and Rowan comes upon her and gets her out of it. I said, Rowan is a huge fan of her work. I said, so he definitely was, instantly attracted to her. I said, they go to dinner, and from there, they make a competition on who can get their next target first. And so this was interesting. I said, because you had them killing bad guys, then there would be bouts of them living their day-to-day lives. Rowan owns a restaurant and is a chef, and he has plans of opening up more restaurants. I said, he also has two brothers, so obviously they will have their love stories. I said, Rowan is called the Butcher, and Sloane is called the Orb Weaver, but he calls her Blackbird. That's his little nickname for her. He calls her Blackbird. I thought that was really sweet, and she calls him Butcher. And so this was interesting because you had them killing bad guys. I already said that. I said I enjoyed their banter, and also I appreciated that it took them a while to get together. It wasn't like a quick thing. They were attracted to each other, but I said they didn't move quickly into bed with each other. You could see their attraction for each other grow as the book progressed. I said when they do finally have sex, it's pretty kinky. I said Rowan is a naughty boy. He is definitely a naughty boy. I'll just say, like, there is, like, ejaculate play, in here with him. Yeah. He's a naughty boy. He's definitely a freak in the sheets. I'll just say that. But it was interesting. And I'll say, like, there wasn't, like, a lot of intimacy in here, which I appreciated, because sometimes it'll be like where once a couple gets together, they're constantly bang, 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 banging it out. And sometimes it gets a little bit like, okay, we've had enough now, right? You could slow down now. You don't have to be like, rabbits, where you're constantly at it. So here it's like, there really only was like, maybe like a couple of sex scenes in this book. So I'm like, thank you. There wasn't like a ton in here, because it just gets overboard where I'm like, really? We're having sex again? Again? Yeah. So, I said there were a few spots that it slowed down a bit in pace in this book, but so other than that, it was a really enjoyable read. So I ended up giving it 4 stars. Probably like, I'd say it's like probably like a 4.5. It was really good. There were like I said, a few bits of like downtime where I was like, it's a little boring, but it did pick up pace again. Very interesting, because she had a way of like, and some people may be grossed out with this because they don't like horror, but I appreciate horror. I like horror. I like comedy. I like dark humor. I do really love dark humor. So this book was definitely up my alley, and hopefully the other books are good. And I do need to read some other like Bryn Weaver books, because this one I was really impressed with. I really enjoyed it, because I was like, well, it could be like, but it was interesting. She was a very strong-willed, smart female, but she didn't make him feel stupid. She didn't put him down. He had his own like strengths and weaknesses, and there was like a time in this book she was a little bit terrified of him, because he did something that obviously to protect her, but it was a little bit terrifying for her. But it was interesting. It was a really interesting, creative, different book. Different take to like horror and romance. And I'm like, I like this. I'm like, I kind of like horror and romance together. And like, this is interesting. And like I said, it kind of reminded me a bit of like Dexter, because, they kill bad guys. They don't kill like good people. They just go after the bad guys. They go after like PDF files and things like that too, So the last one I want to talk about before I get done with this is, I ended up reading A Holiday by Gaslight by Mimi Matthews. Now, this is going to be another one I'm going to put in my December reads. So, it's a historical, it also is a clean fiction. There's no sex scenes in it and stuff like that. Kissing, but that's pretty much it. So you have Sophia and Edward Sharp. His name is, he goes by Ned. It's a closed-door romance, some kissing. As I was pleasantly surprised by this. I enjoyed this novella a lot. I ended up giving it 5 stars. As at the beginning of the novella, Sophie is courting Ned, and when she calls it off, because she feels like they would not be a good match. He doesn't really communicate with her. She's doing all the talking, you know. I said she doesn't see much reaction from him when they do have outings together. She does all the talking and he sits there listening to her. Sophie and her family come from old money, and unfortunately her father is putting them into poverty by trying to upgrade their estate with modern technology like gas lamps and plumbing. I said all of which costs a lot of money. He has even used all of Sophie's dowry in order to upgrade the estate. I said I couldn't stand her father. He was willing to sacrifice their livelihood in order to make things look more modern for the home. I said Sophie sacrificed a lot of herself in order to take care of her family. I said Ned is upset that Sophie ended their courtship, but when she shows up to his office to discuss something with him, he sees his chance to try and win her heart. So when he and his family arrive at their estate, at her family's estate for Christmas, he begins to pursue her again. I said I love their conversations. I said you could see how much he was smitten with her. I said and she didn't think she didn't think she was anything special, and he proves to her that she's beautiful in his eyes. I said it was a very sweet romance. I've been trying to read more closed door romances because I'm like, if it's the point where it's like all this author does is just put in a bunch of sex scenes and call it a romance, no thank you. I want to see a romance. I want to see the buildup of the characters getting to know each other and then getting intimate. Now, if the intimacy is off page, I'm okay with that too, you know. Is it something that I love? No, I'm, you know, I'd say I probably call myself a voyeur. I don't mind looking in on, you know, this couple getting intimate. That's me. That's what I like. I know there's other people out there though that don't like that they don't want to see intimacy on page. Either it's like cringe for them, they can get secondhand embarrassment. Some people, their romance doesn't work that way. Some people are not physical people. Some people are all about emotion. So for me, I can understand people who they say like, I prefer closed door. That's fine. You know, that is fine. I don't mind that. So I really am trying to work on reading more closed door romances besides like ones that are sex on page, and kind of go from there. That way I'm giving more, you know, of you, you know, all more things that you can check out, you know, that hopefully you end up enjoying. So I really did enjoy this one. I thought it was really sweet. I loved seeing the characters getting to know each other, especially because he was very closed off. And also, you know, he was a man where his family came from the lower classes. So he really worked his butt off to get like money, you know, get money and get himself like into the upper class, you know, thing. But of course, you know, the old money, you're going to look at him like, oh, well, you know, he got his money through working. And it's like, oh, yeah, more than you who, you know, end up getting like a silver spoon in your mouth as soon as you're born. So, yeah, I very much respect people who work their ass off to get where they get. You know, I appreciate that a lot more than someone who was born into money. You didn't have to work for that. You got it through your inheritance. Like anybody who's a trust fund baby, they don't have any good work ethic. They didn't have to work for anything. They didn't have to work hard for anything. They don't appreciate the things around them. Where anybody who wasn't born with like a gold or silver spoon in their mouth and they work their ass off, they appreciate the things around them more. And that's the thing I've noticed about people who are rich and born into, you know, wealth. They can't identify with the lower classes because they've never been there. They've never had to sacrifice things in order to get, you know, where they're at now, you know. So I will appreciate a rich person who actually worked their ass off, like, you know, self-starters, people who have gone and they've come from nothing and they still appreciate their humble beginnings, you know, and they still respect the people around them, you know. Those are the ones that I have respect for, are the ones that work their ass off to get where they're at, you know. So I really enjoyed this one. You could definitely tell, like with him, he was a bit of like, oh, she may not like me, she may not respect me because I'm a part of the lower classes. And for her, she was like, no, I don't see you that way. She goes, no, I mean, she's like, look at my father, how he is, you know. Her father was basically sacrificing all of their dowries and all of their money just so he can have, like, you know, more of the modern technology. And I'm like, dude, you're putting your family into, like, you'll go into debtor's prison, you know, all that stuff. What's wrong with you? You know, he was very selfish, and he showed how much he really wanted boys, and he didn't want girls. Just asshole, just a complete asshole. I hated him. But Ned was a really, really great guy. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this here. There are more books that I could talk about. I'll just say, like, there are other things that I liked this year too. Well, I'll say it real quick though. This series here by Kate Bateman, I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed all those books. Maybe I'd say, like, Wicked Game was a little slightly less than the other book, but I still all enjoy them. And Desert Island Duke, I really enjoyed. Those were good. And then I'd say the series that I really enjoyed this month, or this year, was the series right here. I really enjoyed those books. I have an X on the one because I really didn't enjoy that book, but the rest of the series I did. With Cat and Bones, I really enjoyed that series. But like I said, it's getting late and I don't want to keep, like, going into, like, all this stuff. But I really enjoyed those books too. I try to, like, anything that's a 4 or 5 star, you know, is good to me. If I gave something 4 stars, I still, you know, would reread it, but maybe I didn't love it, you know, but I still enjoyed it, you know. Maybe over time I'd like it less, but, you know, I'd say, like, I had, you know, a pretty good, you know, year. There were some duds, you know, this year that I read, but I would say, like, the majority of what I read, I probably, you know, I enjoyed myself with it. Yeah. But yeah, that's pretty much it here. I'm sorry about the long video. But yeah, I'd say, like, these were good. You know, these were good books. And that one, like I said, the Soft Flannel Hank, oh my God, that was so good. That one was just so good to me. And whenever I hear, like, somebody kind of gush about a book, I'm always like, oh, I'm not sure if I like it, you know? Oh, I'm not sure. But I really enjoyed that one. I'd say those 2 recommendations, like Soft Flannel Hank and that one right there. What was it again? The Mimi Matthews one. A Holiday by Gaslight. Those 2 were recommended to me by Crystal's Bookish Life. Those ones, I would say, like, she gushed about them and I'm like, oh, I'm not sure if I'm gonna like them, but I did. So I have to thank Crystal from Crystal's Bookish Life for recommending those, and I really did enjoy those too. So, but yeah, that's it for this video here. Have yourselves a good day. Take care of yourselves. Be kind to each other, and I will see you all on the next video. All right, bye.